This is the day we have been given. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Good morning and welcome to church. We are not in the sanctuary, but this is still church. For church is not the building, it is the people. And wherever we are gathered, even over Zoom, is sanctuary. I welcome all of you wherever and whenever you are connecting with us. Beth and I, like you, are connecting from our homes, along with the help of Michael Feeney, who's providing technical support and guidance for these services. And I hope you'll join Beth, Michael, and me after the service for what we still call coffee hour, though you have to bring your own coffee, tea, or juice. In addition to our regular weekly events, this afternoon at 2 p.m., we're having a vigil for George Floyd in connection with a memorial service, which will be held in Boston at 3. So come stand with us with or without a sign from 2 to 3. Or if you prefer, join St. Luke's for their vigil after the memorial service from 3:45 to 5 p.m. We'll share more details on these events and other things coming up this week in our What's Happening emails. And if you're not receiving them, send us a message and we'll add you to our list. Whether we are protesting or worshiping or sharing tea and our thoughts, it is our covenant which ties us together. Michael will now unmute everyone so that we can hear each other say those words. Join me now in our covenant. Love is
a spirit
of church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to cherish the living earth, to seek truth and love, and to help one another. In 1844, the Unitarian poet and abolitionist James Russell Lowell wrote a poem called The Present Crisis, urging his fellow white Americans to stand up for the abolitionist cause. At the time, that position was very unpopular. Only 4 years before, when the Unitarian minister and strong abolitionist Charles Follen died, no church in Boston would agree to hold his memorial service because of his views. So Lowell wrote to encourage others to take the courageous stand of speaking freedom for those enslaved. Today, we too stand at a crisis point. Though Lowell's words did inspire others to join that work, as we now know now, merely freeing those who had been enslaved was not enough. The structures of society remained too much the same, enslaving them still in all but name. So again, Lowell's words call to us across the centuries to stand with those who take the risks of proclaiming and working for freedom for all. Let us ponder what it would mean for us to take those risks as we sing the first verse of the hymn which came from Lowell's poem, Once to Every Soul and Nation.
In the strife
As I light our chalice, I invite you, if you have a candle near you, to light your own. Our words today come from my UU colleague, Kim Hampton. Holy is the flame that each one carries, the living, unique fire of experience and truth. Holy, too, is the chalice that holds the gathered fire, where one is all, and all is one, and none is ever lost. Let's sing the second verse now of Once to Every Soul and Nation. This is the time in the service where if we were all together, I would invite the children and anybody else who wants to come down front for a children's talk. So come a little closer or imagine yourself coming down front for some conversation. Today I have a story for you and it's one of my favorite stories. So I know I've told it before and I hope you enjoy it if you're hearing it again. Once upon a time, there was a rabbi. A rabbi is a teacher, as you may know, and this rabbi was up late at night studying the Torah, the scriptures, with his students. And they were arguing over the finer points of what this word meant and what this meant for their lives. And it got later and later. And finally, one of them looked out the window and realized that, I'm looking out my window, those little fingers of dawn that start to appear when light is beginning to dawn, that it was just getting light. And the rabbi, and so the student pointed that out and the rabbi looked and contemplated the window. And he said to his students, how do you know when the night is gone and the day has begun? How do you know when it is fully day? And the students sat for a minute and they puzzled and they thought about it. And somebody said, well, is it when you can tell the difference between a sheep and a wolf? And the rabbi said, no. They sat and they thought some more. Somebody said, well, if you're walking down a road, it's when you can tell the difference between a stick and a snake. The rabbi said, no. Students thought a little more. Is it when you see a tree and you can tell if it's a fig tree or an olive tree? The rabbi said, no. Students sat. Nobody had an answer. And the rabbi said, we will know that it is fully day when you can look in the eyes of another person and see that person as your brother or your sister or your sibling. That's when we'll know it's day. Now, if you guys were here, I would ask what you thought of that. And if you have had moments where you have really felt that it was truly day for you or for our world, I might ask you, where in the process between dark and daylight are we? So since I can't ask you those things now, I hope you'll think about those questions and be aware in your soul and in your world about how daylight is coming. Let's move into our time of prayer and meditation by singing Kumbaya. So this is the time in the service where we share our joys and our sorrows. And for each one, I'll place a stone in the bowl of water, indicating the ripples that go out from our individual joys and sorrows. For these Zoom worship services, we invite you either, if you would like to speak your joy or sorrow, to raise your Zoom hand, which you'll find going to the three little dots near your picture, or you could type into the chat that you have a joy or sorrow you'd like to share. Or if you'd like it shared, but you don't want to be the one to say it, type it into the chat and Carrie Borkowski will read it. So I invite you now to share your joys and your sorrows with one another.
Good morning, my name is Amelia, and I have a joy that today it is officially summer for my school year.
Okay, thank you, Amelia. So I'm going to place this stone for the joy of summer, and let's all say our response, may love abound.
I think Beth has a joy. Gonna share it. Yeah.
I just wanted to say my daughter Sophie lives in New York City and saw a lot of protests this past week and was just moved to do something. And she and two of her friends decided to reach out to their friends over social media and say, "Hey, send me donations and I will donate to groups that support Black Lives Matter." And in the span of 48 hours, the three of them raised $9,000. And one of their friends had a colleague at Google, and Google told them they would match the money raised. So they were able to raise close to $18,000 and donated it to a number of different causes that support Black Lives Matter. So I was proud of her for doing that.
Thank you, Beth. So for Sophie and her friends, and for all who have supported the work of Black Lives Matter with their marching, with their money, with their voices in so many ways, we place this stone. Let's say our response, may love abound.
So Carol shared that her joy was to gather with kindred spirits on Tuesday evening for solidarity.
Thank you, Carol. So I'm placing this stone for the unity we all felt on Tuesday evening and for all the other places where that same unity and purpose was felt. May love abound. Are there others?
Ellie has a joy that we get to visit with some extended family today.
For the joy of family who some of us are now starting to see, I place this stone. And for all our families seen or near us, those whom we can't see, but the connections we feel. May love and connection abound. Others? I place one final stone for the joys and sorrows present but unspoken among us. Would you join me now in our unison prayer as Michael unmutes us? We give thanks.
Thanks for being
We give thanks for being here. We give thanks for
for
being
being
here
here
together.
together.
Let us open our hearts to mystery. We are indeed praying and crying and singing these days. Love, power of love, be near us, be with us, be within us, be among us. We fear for so many things going on in our society. May the power of love heal our divisions. May the power of love work through us, helping us to see all as sisters, brothers, and siblings, without difference, with the same yearnings, the same needs, and the same deserving of fullness of life, of being able to use our gifts both to serve our own lives and the larger world. We mourn all the ways this is not happening in our society, and for the roles we, unknowingly even, have played a part in doing that. May our eyes be opened that we may act in new ways, ways which offer life and freedom and liberty and justice and love to all people. We pray for our nation at this time and for those who govern us, that they may act with wisdom and greatness of spirit, seeing others with compassion and empathy. We too remember to look beyond our own borders, and we pray for our world. We pray for all who are living and dying with COVID-19, for all who are mourning those who are lost, for all whose work has ended or who are worried about losing jobs, not having money for rent or food or health care for their families. We remember that food and health and shelter are human rights, and we pray that we may come and move to a world where that is not something to be fought for, but something all people have, not having to earn it, but just a basic right. We pray for those whom we love, those whom we may be seeing, those whom we still cannot see. We pray for their health in body, mind, and spirit. We pray for ourselves, that we may have the courage to say what needs to be said, the wisdom to listen, and the heart to love. In silence now, let us take time for our own prayer and our own meditation. What a week it has been. A week of mourning and anguish and despair, but also a week of hope and connection. We gathered Tuesday evening with a couple hundred people in person and another couple hundred on Facebook Live to host Scituate's vigil for George Floyd. We breathed in silence for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, many on bent knee, as we remembered those whose breath was taken from them by the structures of racism in our country. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Tony McDade, and so many more, too many to name. We remembered too the more than 100,000 people in the US whose breath was taken from them by COVID-19, and the ways those same structures of racism have meant that a disproportionate number of those who died were people of color. We watched the president and attorney general clear peaceful protesters from in front of a church, tear gassing clergy and lay people who were caring for the injured and feeding the hungry, so that the president could pose with a Bible, a book which tells in many voices of a God whose great commandment is to love. We watched as some police officers attacked protesters and those witnessing and reporting on what was happening, and as others lifted up the fallen and knelt in solidarity with the protesters. We were reminded again that life is not simple. Here in Scituate, many stood at the Rotary and on the Common, witnessing to that truth and the need for change. Some took to Scituate Monthly to enlarge our community's understanding of the ways racism permeates even our small, overwhelmingly white town. Many were moved by an account on Scituate Monthly from a recent Scituate High School graduate of being harassed and disparaged publicly for her Muslim faith and the ways the town and the community whited out her experience. And many of us participated in the Stride meeting, which was founded as the Unity Council in part in response to her experience. Life is not simple. To give myself heart, I went back to Elizabeth Alexander's beautiful poem, praise song for the day, which she wrote for Barack Obama's first inauguration. Here's a little of it. Say it plain, that many have died for this day. Sing the names of the dead who brought us here, who laid the train tracks, raised the bridges, picked the cotton and the lettuce, built brick by brick the glittering edifices they would then keep clean and work inside of. Praise song for struggle, praise song for the day, praise song for every hand-lettered sign, the figuring it out at kitchen tables. Some live by love thy neighbor as thyself, others by first do no harm or take no more than you need. What if the mightiest word is love? Love beyond marital, filial, national, love that casts a widening pool of light, love with no need to preempt grievance. In today's sharp sparkle, this winter air, anything can be made, any sentence begun. On the brink, on the brim, on the cusp, praise song for walking forward in that light. What if the mightiest word is love? Now, it doesn't take much effort on our part to say yes to the poet's question. As Unitarian Universalists, we believe in the power of love. We believe that the world and all who inhabit it are rooted in love, were created in love, and are supposed to live in love. But our yes isn't as easy as it seems. And it's not just that we ourselves don't always live in the fullness of that love. That would be too much to expect. But that our ancestors, both in this place and in the larger UU context, have played a part in narrowing our society's concept of love. So that part of what we are seeing in our country is the fruit of our teaching and our doing. It's all about the individual versus the collective. Is religion about my understanding of truth? Or is it about living out the truth of our understanding in a way which promotes the welfare of all? Too often, our tradition has been focused on our individual understandings rather than living it out. Think back to our ancestors in this place. John Lothrop and the other Puritans who joined with him to form the first parish church of Scituate didn't come here because they were not able to practice love and justice in England. They came here because they were not allowed to think about the Bible and its teachings as their minds and hearts led them. And freedom of mind is important. I don't mean to undercut that. But too often our focus on freedom of mind has led us to prize our view of truth over the world it could lead to. And in that focus, if my view of truth doesn't align exactly with your view of truth, then we can't work or explore more together. Think about this congregation splitting in two only 8 years after it was gathered over the correct way to do baptisms. Really? Does it matter whether you are immersed fully in running water or merely marked with water? Wasn't the point that by this ritual, people were promising to follow Jesus's teachings of love and justice? So from our beginnings, we have prized purity of thought over how it is lived out. And this focus on purity of thought over and over led to more splits among the churches of New England. Most noticeable, the one in the early 1800s over the doctrine of the Trinity and whether Jesus was God or a great man to follow. And that split led Scituate, as well as many other towns, to the seceding of the first church from the first parish. Did they have to separate over that difference in understanding? Couldn't they just have agreed on the following Jesus part? While we were on the narrow side of the baptism question, we, like all the Unitarian congregations, were on the broader side of the Unitarian Trinitarian question, with the understanding that Jesus was someone to follow. And we might have continued in that more inclusive stance had we followed leaders like William Ellery Channing and Theodore Parker, who believed in an expansive spirit of justice, and that it wasn't so much what we believed as what we did that mattered. But instead, Ralph Waldo Emerson became our dominant voice. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Emerson. As I've said before, it was Emerson's Divinity School address which sent me to Divinity School. But Emerson was all about each of us alone communing with the Spirit. And that has been a harmful legacy, both for our tradition and our country. For Emerson's views have permeated much of religion in America, even, and perhaps especially, among those who would be horrified to think that the heretic Emerson had any part in their theology or worldview. In his critique of religion in America, the critic Harold Bloom argued that whatever the tradition, religion in the US has developed into the American religion. Whether we worship Yahweh, follow Jesus, practice Buddhist meditation, cast a circle, or commune with nature, it's all about the individual's relationship with God or the divine. Bloom said that the paradigmatic American hymn is The Garden, which is about me, not me literally, but you know what I mean, me and Jesus alone in a garden where he walks with me and he talks with me and he tells me I am his own. It's all about the individual salvation, and the individual salvation has nothing to do with anyone else's salvation or well-being in this interpretation. And though this is a specifically Christian hymn, we see that emphasis even in Buddhists in America, where the practice is all about one's personal meditation, rather than understanding the quest for enlightenment as part of the work of reducing suffering for all people. The Buddha didn't sit under his bo tree, basking there after he reached enlightenment. He went back into the world to alleviate suffering. Bloom takes all this emphasis here on the individual back to our own Ralph Waldo Emerson. So when it comes to racism, it's no wonder that it's hard for us to see beyond our own individual role. We're not used to looking beyond the self. So like the fish who doesn't know it's swimming in water, we haven't been able to see that racism is built into the structures of our society, especially when those structures have benefited us. So what can we do about this? How can we make up for the radical individualism we unwittingly have promoted for centuries? Last Sunday, in her reflection, Mary Beaulieu invited us to lean into the church. And leaning into the church is a good place to start, but only if the church we lean into is one which supports this understanding of our life here being about our life together and what we can do together to offer healing and wholeness to the world. Too often our churches, and I don't mean First Parish in particular, but our churches have focused on the individual's search for meaning, for healing, for wholeness. And so we haven't expected much of people because it's all about their needs. And we have let stand the false equation that communing with the divine in the woods is the same as worshiping and practicing in community. But it's not the same. Yes, we need to cultivate those moments when the currents of the universal being circulate through us, when we are part or parcel of God. There I go, quoting Emerson again. But that's not what we come to church for. I can't guarantee that you will find that moment here on any given Sunday. And if you do find it, chances are it's because you've trained your spirit outside of Sunday mornings at 10:30 a.m. to receive it. We come to church instead to practice the harder job of love. Love takes others, and here we find others committed to that practice. Our worship is just the start of the practice. And so if we're going to lean in so that love may flow out, I'd like to invite you to think about church differently. We're already thinking about it differently since we've been over Zoom, realizing that church isn't a building, it's us, it's the people gathered. And we know too that it's not a time or place you pop into just when you need to be fed. It's a commitment to a practice. We commit to being here together. We show up to practice loving, to learn how we may love more widely, more deeply, and more effectively. We show up to hear how others are succeeding and failing in their attempts to love, and to encourage, commiserate, and celebrate with one another. The world needs us to lean in that love may flow out. We could be doing this better, more intentionally. And I'd like to challenge us this Sunday and next week to think about how we can do this. One idea I have, for instance, is to divide our congregation into groups of 10 or 12 people and ask us all to commit to gather in those small groups over Zoom for now, once a week. Perhaps we'd begin by getting to know each other more deeply, what brings us here, what we are seeking, how we have been hurt, what we know about love, and then move on from there as the path unfolds. We also need to focus on reaching out to other people who are also seeking to deepen their knowledge and practice of love. So many people have been hurt by other traditions or were raised without any understanding of what church can be. How do we reach out to them and let them know that they don't have to do the hard work of loving alone? Who were all those people who attended our vigil? How do they need to deepen our love? Where are they being supported? And we need to reach out to them, not so we can fund our building and our budget, but so that we can transform ourselves along with them and our world. We need First Parish to grow, not for the sake of keeping First Parish alive, but for the sake of the world, because we have a life-saving message that is needed more than ever now, ever it was. A message of inherent worth and dignity, which if we really lived it out, would transform us, the collective us, as well as the individuals who make up the us and our world. We're now going to sing a verse of Carolyn McDade's hymn, "We'll Build a Land," to lead us into a time of beginning to envision the church and the land we want to build. As we sing, Carrie and Michael are going to place you into small groups. Each group will have a facilitator from the parish committee who will invite you to share what you need from First Parish to root yourself more deeply in love, and how you'd like to work with others at First Parish to help that love flow into the world. Over the week, we'll take what comes out of this brainstorming and divide it up into areas of church life. And then next week, we'll break into groups on those areas so that you'll choose an area you'd like to work on and talk with others next week who are also interested in working in that area of our life together. For those of you who are watching this service at another time, we're not going to record the groups or our further conversation. So we wish you peace in the coming days and invite you to join us in the mighty work of love. I invite you now to join Beth in singing our hymn.
anointed